Okay. Not too sure if anybody can hear me. We should be starting soon. So I'm just waiting for some of my face-to-face students to arrive. And until they do, I can just start the image that we're going to be working on. There's a few years back where I was looking at some different drawings done by some graffiti artists. And one of the graffiti artists that caught my eye created a whole pile of these different images with birds, and they were very explosive, kind of the way they were put together. And so what I decided is that I would create some images in that style. And so I'll just show you. This is the one that we're going to do today. And I'll just back out here a little bit and show you some of the other ones that are of the same style. So just give me a second here as I flip through some of my stuff. I'll show you some of the other ones. So this is some of the same style of bird, which is very graffiti style. Hi, come on in. I'm just talking to the guys online. So so you can see the way the graffiti style of this artist's work is done. And here's another example of it. Do you want to plug that? I think you hit that cord. No? Just 2 seconds, guys. We lost our projection over top. Take a little while for it to come back on. No sweat. Nice to see you back. Everybody else seems to be running late, but that's okay. Okay, so here's another example of one that is of the same style. It almost looks like they have lightning coming out of their head, so it's just the style that they do. And here's another example. And here's a third one done in the very similar style. So I sort of nicknamed it the splash style, and it's just a whole pile of this one here I took from being just the splash style to the next one where I started to add a little bit more texture to it, and then ended up putting it into almost like a techno kind of bird. So, but the one we're going to work on today looks like this. So this is the bird we're going to be drawing. And so when you're ready, we can start. And the other people who are here for the face-to-face will just have to do with catching up. Otherwise, we'll never get any of this one done, because this one's going to take us a little while. And so that's the example that we're going to be working on. And again, we're using a program called Sketchbook Pro. Sketchbook Pro is one that I've been using for a couple of years. And the first thing we do is, just on a layer, we put in a real quick pencil drawing of the beak and how we want it to look. And so we just sort of sketched it in really quick to give you the feel of it. And then from that, we will create our bird. And so the first thing you do is you want to bring this down and make just do any nice little adjustments you have to the sketch to get it the way you want it to look. And again, it's just done in a nice light gray. And you can see the way the bird's mouth is formed here, and it comes down to his beak. And his beak has a little bit of wings on the side. And again, it's just a rough sketch because it's just approximately what we're going to start working with. It's not going to be our finished design. Our finished design we do separately away from this, but you can see the way there's only very few elements on this, so it's not like it's a really difficult drawing. And it's basically the real stiff eyebrow that he has, or it goes over top his eye, that makes him look like he's an evil bird and not happy. And so that's where I got the name Evil Bird from. And so that's the pattern that we're working on trying to create. And once you have that drawn on there and you're happy, then we're going to start to draw. And so you can see there's another layer on here, and I'll just pop it in. You can see the way I've started the next layer. And so that was just to move things along so I can help and talk as it's drawing. The biggest thing that you want to do is you want to spend a little bit of time on the eye. And so you can see the way this eye is made. So you always want to zoom right in on that. And again, you can see the outline is done, is going to be taken off at the end. So you don't want that dark lines around the outside. And you can see the way I put the eye together using a little bit of a green. And then again, I used the smudging tool in order to create some of the pattern. And so where you want to spend at least probably about 20 minutes on this aspect of it, simply because it is the focal point of the painting. And so you're going to spend a fair amount of time just trying to create that eye so it looks as realistic as you can get it to look.
I just moved my foot.
You just lost the projector again, no big deal.
You saw the power. Let's push this under here. Keep it away from your dancing feet. And so, as you can see, some of the details of the eye, you always want to have it look like there's a shadow from the overhead. So the layer that goes over top, there's a brown, and then you have some shadow. There's shadows that come down from that, and you want to use your smudge tool a fair amount to create that shadow and to create the feeling of 3 dimensions. So that in order to create the 3 dimensions, what you want to do is you want to have your black eyeball or your black pupil, and then you have the green that comes up from the edges. And the light that I have showing through, I did in white and made it fairly bold and fairly bright. This one is not big enough, the one that is on the pupil, so I would expand that simply because it is a focal point. So you want to go in with some very pure white. And the reason why you spend so much time on any given area like this is because it's what creates the interest in the work. If you do a good job of the eyeball, the bird is going to have a personality and it's going to look like it's alive. And so it's worth taking the time to do it properly and to take the time to put some details in there. So, and because of that, I'd spent a little bit of time playing before people got here as I was setting the system up. And so you can see the way I've created some of the details in this bird. So about halfway through, we'll talk about the drawing that we did last week, and just I'll show the people that I have here and the people online how I spent a little bit extra time, probably double the amount of time that we spent here in the class, and what I ended up by the time I was done. I think it was kind of cool, and it ended up looking all right by the time it was done, so I was happy with it when it was finished. And so I did put my name on it, but it turned out a little different than what we had in class. A little bizarre looking. It looked like a place from another planet. So you can see some of the, as I'm drawing, you can see some of these details coming out. I'm pulling, using my smudge tool again to try to create the nice little patterns and the nice little drag. on the bird's face. And so if you want to go back and see the original, the first drawing, this is what it looked like, just the outlines. And so this was the outline of the bird. It's a very simple pattern. Not super complex. This bird is not a big challenge to draw, because most of it, there's only like 3 or 4 elements to it, and that's the eye and the beak, and then everything else sort of just comes together as you pull it together. So I kind of liked it simply because of the simplicity of it, and almost anyone can draw it simply because it's one of those drawings that as you play with it, it will get more and more interesting to look at. So, but that's the outline. So I will leave that up there for a few minutes, so those of you that are drawing at home can work on that. And then I can throw the eyeball back up so if people want to see the eyeball. So you can see the whole thing there where the eyeball is there, and it has the rest of the bird. And what I did is I just started to put in some of the colors. And so again, it was the applying of the color and then using the smudge tool in order to blend those colors together. And in the end, you're going to take off the outline. The outline is just there as sort of a guideline to help us with the basic drawing. So you can take the outline off, and you can see the bird still works without the outline on there. And then you can just give it the edges. You can smooth them out and make them look the way they should. And again, for those people who are tuning in for the first time and have never seen any of my work, I'm Darren Cannell, and I am a self-taught artist. And over time decided that I wanted to learn how to do tablet art, because that meant I could do it anywhere. And so I taught myself over a period of about 10 years now working on the tablet. My biggest push was I really started to push hard at it in 2010, and have been drawing a lot since then. And so I've drawn thousands of pictures on the tablet, and through trial and error found things that work for me and things that don't work. And so that's what I'm sharing in all these different sessions. And so I appreciate the fact that you logged in, and comments are always welcome. The unfortunate thing is that because I have students in class, I won't be answering any of the questions until possibly after the fact. And so I'll answer questions, but it'll have to wait until I get home. So if you have a question, feel free to ask. I have used other programs. The Autodesk Sketchbook is the one that I have used the most and have settled on as the app that I like to use. I use an Apple iPad, the biggest one that you can buy. This was a 2015. They came out with a very big tablet, and I really like the bigger shape because my eyes are not the best anymore. Being an old man, I need to have the bigger tablet. Some people can draw these, and I've had students in my class who have drawn using their phone, and I've had people who are online who have used their phone. So the size is not that important. The second thing that I settled on was the Apple Pencil. The Apple Pencil is a very nice tool and is very good at being able to take into account how hard I press. The harder I press, the brighter it gets, which is something that a Wacom tablet will do. And there's different pencils out there that will do it now. But when we first started, you had to use your thumb, and if you wanted to increase the darkness of it, you had to do that through the opacity settings within the app itself. So you don't have to do that so much anymore because it starts to work very well with just the pencil. So I'm going to turn the flow way down on this color area, and then I'm going to soften in some of these background colors. Now, for those of you that are in other places around the world, this is a school holiday for the kids. And so most of my students are younger. And so they are, I'm hoping that they're out skiing in some place like that and had the opportunity to go someplace. And if wherever they're at, hopefully they'll be able to see what I'm doing online and be able to draw out online, just like some of you will be doing from home now. So again, the goal of this 2 hours is a lot of the paintings that I do won't be finished in 2 hours, but it does give you a little bit of a start, and it will give you the foundation so that you can then finish the drawing afterwards by putting in a little bit more time at home after the session. And so I don't record the rest of the session, like to go from a certain point. So whatever I finish in these 2 hours, that will be recorded and will be online. And then after that, I will just do some screenshots that I will share later on if people are interested and ask for it. So you can see the way this this beak and the brown is starting to work with the bird. Now the nice thing about this bird is there's very few things you can do wrong. Once you have the beak on, and once you have the eye done in half decent color and it looks good, then after that, then it's a lot of playing. Very similar to the way we did the drawing last week, is that once you got the mountains in there and some of the other objects, then after that it was just a matter of playing and making the picture look half decent. So I'm very excited to hopefully see some of the artwork that was done by the students and how they finished that one, or if they even had the opportunity to do it. Since this was a holiday, I hope they all got outside a little bit and did some stuff other than drawing the whole time, although you can't spend a better time than drawing. So you can see how this is starting to come together now. How we've started to see some of the brown. The eye is starting to look half decent. The eye, we'll put a little bit of texture in there afterwards with using the dots, one of the dot tools. But you want to find this, the funny gray color that's in this bird is one that you're going to have to work a little bit in order to achieve. And so again, we're just going to put it on using our flow airbrush. And then we want the opacity to be very high. We want the size to be half decent size. And then we want to try to find that color. And the color is a very strange one. And so it's kind of a browny, yellowy, blah kind of color. And so it's kind of a hard one to find, but it's right there. And so if you're looking for it, that's where you find it. And that's the color that you'll see underneath the beak and the top part of its head and all around the outside. And so it's one that you're just going to spray on to put on some texture and put on some different colors. And so it goes around the outside. So we're going to put it all around here, and we want to make that a little bit larger. Otherwise, we're going to be here all night. Make it pretty big. And then you're just going to put some of this stuff around the outside edges. So you see how this dark pattern is a shadow that comes from the beak and underneath the mouth right here. And then across the top of the eye, it's very dark across the top of the eye. And you just sort of put this in different areas so you can see the way the bird is going to start to fill in. Now the nice thing is that, again, there's no right, there's no wrong when doing this. It's just a matter of getting some of this color on there, and then we're going to pull it using our smearing, and we're going to create the outside of the bird that way. And so the first time I drew this bird, I drew it really long. and it was a lot taller than what this one will be. And so this one is a little bit less thin and narrow, and it's going to be a little bit more blocky, which will make it a little bit more powerful of a bird. We're going to make them look a little stronger. And if you want things to look a little darker, obviously you just press a little harder, and then you can also alter the colors. So I've decided I'm going to go into probably this area a little bit. So let's go into the brighter, the yellowy side. And that'll be right down here, closer to the, where the really light yellow matches up with it. And then out of here. We'll have the color coming off it. And again, we're just sort of putting on some blocks of colors like we did last class. Just trying to create and fill in some of the different colors that we will then turn into feathers. And this actually looks more like a hairy bird than it does a. But you can see how the colors start to work in order to create some of the texture and create some of the feelings of a mean bird. Lighter gray, and use this lighter gray or lighter browny color just to fill in some of the spaces in between. And then I'll come in and I'll smudge it all together and see how it looks. So there's very few areas that are just pure white. That's not the goal, and it's not what this bird's going to have on him. So you can see how I've almost filled in the whole background with the different colors. And then I just take a smudge tool, and I'm working over top of the smudge tool. So the smudge tool, when you're doing the smudge tool here, what you want to do is you want to try to create the texture that you would have in feathers. And so you find, like, you'll notice the settings I have it on is 33.39, and then a flow I have very low, because I'm going to end up doing a fair number of layers of this stuff over top. And you remember how we duplicated layers? We're going to do that a fair amount to create this this bird's feathers and the beak, and to fill in all the different colors. But at the moment, all I'm doing is trying to smudge it around a little bit to make it look a little bit more like a bird. And so as you pull these colors out, it starts to give you the feeling of feathers, because it starts to pull the different colors. So you can see around the eye right at the moment where I'm working now, you can see how the layers start to fan out from there. If I'm moving too fast or you can't follow along, just let me know. So you can see how it starts to, you can start to feel the shape of the bird, because as you pull these layers out, you can start to form the roundness of the bird. And again, you can see how I'm just pulling the color away from the beak a little bit, so it creates a shadow and gives it the depth feeling. And then this other black piece here is going to be the mouth. And then the beak is sitting right on top of it. And so as I pull, you can see how that starts to give you the feelings of feathers. So even if you quit right now, you would have a bird where people right away would recognize it as a bird. And that's a nice thing, is that It takes very few strokes in order to fill in enough information so people would say, oh, that's a hawk, or that is this bird, or that is this bird. And so they'll see a bird almost immediately simply because it has a beak and it has an eye. Now we're only doing one eye. We're not doing the other one. We're only doing the one. And we've zoomed in on the bird, so you sort of see them at an angle. So, and I always assume this bird is a male for some reason. I don't know why, but I've drawn this guy a couple times, and this is what the strangeness looks like. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer, and you'll see how it starts to fill in a little bit more of the colors. So you notice how I just duplicated. I duplicated it 3 times, and you can see how quickly that filled in the color of it. And the background color came in really fast. And then you merge them back together again, and then you continue to pull. Now that you've got some of the colors, you can pull some of the white down to help with some of the pattern. And again, I'm just trying to fill in enough background so that later on when we come back in with some of the black lines and the feathers over top, you're going to have enough information on here to let the viewer's eyes fill in the spots and the areas. It will make it look really neat when it's done. So again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just a matter of pulling the different colors and trying to create the feeling of a bird. So how you doing over there?
Good.
Am I going too fast? Are you with me?
Sort of. I'm sort of it.
So you get, this is again the smudge round bristle brush, and it's the one that we used a lot of in the last drawing. And in this one here, we're using it a lot again, and just trying to create, you just notice how I've got it set for 33.9. I'm going to make that a little bit thinner. And so I'm going to push it back down, and I'm going to move the flow up to make it flow a little bit better. And what that'll do is it'll help a lot with the with creating a different feeling than the 33 did. And so you can see how now you can start to pull the white a certain way, and because I cranked it way up as far as the flow goes, you'll then see some of those lines start to appear and start to create a little bit more interest when it comes to the different areas. And so I'll probably go back to the 33 in time, but at the moment I want to put a little bit more of a light color down this one, down the middle here, to put some separations and make it a little bit more interesting to look at. And again, I'm just pulling the color in order to give us that feeling, creating a little bit longer of a stroke because I've been able to push the flow way up, which will allow it to pull a lot more. And I really like the white around the eye this time, and so I think I'll probably leave that, where the last time I had it all dark, and this time I'm going to have it lighter around the eye. And again, I'm just trying to pull. So this is a longer haired bird than the last one I did. And the nice thing about doing these drawings a couple of times is each time you do them, they're a little bit different. And that's what makes it cool. So all I'm doing is I'm pulling a little bit of color from the the mouth at the moment and putting a little bit of a separation between the beak and the rest of the head, just to give it a little bit of a separation, because I want that to stand out a little bit more. And the only way I can do that is by creating some separation. I'm going to make sure that the beak comes to a very nice point, like a raptor's beak. And I'll continue to pull down the shadow that's underneath, and then I'll make that shadow a little bit darker later on. But for now, I'm just going to work with the colors I have and just try and cover and fill in as much as I possibly can, and then we're going to put the color over top. So at the moment, we're just trying to fill in the background. Fill it all in by pulling the lines down and across. I'm working on the bottom left-hand corner at the moment, and I'm trying to pull that down so that you have this feeling of feathers. So you can see how this black or darker green or whatever color that is, I pulled it in order to give it, that will obviously be an emphasis point, and where there will be some darker and some lighter spots. So as I pull this, it just keeps going, creates interest and interest simply by the strokes. Okay, now the two things that I did leave out, if you'll notice, I pulled the bird's mouth down. So I put, what I did is I put the original outline back on, and I can see how I pulled the mouth down a little bit, which it makes him look like he has a different type of frown. And the beak I've changed a little bit, but the things that I haven't put on yet, and I have to put them on in some darker colors, is the two nostrils. And so there's two nostrils on this bird, and so I'm still going to work it in, and I'm going to work it in a darker black color in order to make it stand out from the rest of it, because it's one of the elements that tell us this is a bird. And so that's what I'm just doing now, very quickly putting these two strokes on, just to help it stand out. And then I'll take the black back off, and then I'll continue to create the nostrils. Simply by filling in some of the color. Now, using the pencil and dark means I can start to put some depth into things by putting shadows in. And so you can see where this shadow is going along the edge of the beak. And what that'll do is it'll sink the beak down into the bird's face a little bit more. And then I'm going to outline the bird's lips. I don't know how, if you've ever looked at birds' lips, they don't have very big lips, but they do have some. And that's what that shape is that I just drew around its mouth. I just put a little bit more emphasis on that so it stands out a little bit more. And again, it creates a fairly nice little feeling that we're then going to pull all this stuff in different directions to make it a little bit more interesting to look at. So. Now what I'm doing now is putting another layer underneath the eye. And so I just drew a black line around there, and it's just because again, you want to put a little bit more emphasis onto that eye. So I use my pencil and put a little bit more drawing on that. And then the same thing with this, it's the white that runs across the top of this eyebrow. I'm just going to emphasize that by putting some dark over top of it. And so all of those are just little things that will help, again, create a little bit more interest in the beak and stuff like that. And then I'm going to go in and touch it up a little bit by zooming in. So I zoom in on the eye, and you can see the pencil drawings and how rough they are. I'm going to soften those up by using the smudge tool again. And so the smudge tool, I'm going to put the size way down. So at 6.9, put the flow way down, put the strength way down, and then what that'll do is it'll allow you to just barely soften up those edges if you can. But you're going to have to push very hard to make it happen. And what tends to happen when I do this is I get frustrated with it, and then I go in and I turn the flow way up and the strength way up, and it doesn't work as well. So the idea is not to be impatient. Take your time, and then work on creating some smoother lines and taking off the pencil aspect of it and blend it into the background of it. So you see this part underneath is a perfect example. So I have this ledge of black, and I'm going to soften it up by going back and forth, and then I'm going to pull it to make it look a little bit more like something you might find on a bird's face. So all this is doing is allowing me to soften up that hair around it, and then I'm going to fix the same thing with the mouth. So the mouth has the outlines, but I want it to be blended in a little bit more, and so it looks like it's more part of the bird rather than just these black lines put over top of it. Now that little effort that you put into it makes a huge difference, and people notice it, and so it's worth doing that, and that's taking the time to soften some of your edges and to soften some of the lines so they're not so pencily. They're not hash lines, and that's like a lot of times cartoon drawings are done with hash lines where you have a very solid line. I try to eliminate that from my drawings as much as I possibly can, have less lines and have the color against color to create the lines rather than just black and just white. And so you can see what I'm doing here when it comes to softening up some of these edges of these lines. The lines, I don't mind them being there, but I don't want them to be so stark and so pencily, which is a new word for the day, pencily. So this is a shadow underneath the underneath the beak, nose, underneath the bird's beak, and so what I'm going to do is I soften that up almost completely, and then blend it into the background, and then it becomes a shadow rather than an actual line. And then from there, you're going to draw some hair that's coming out of it. So you can see how that bird is starting to come together, and we're starting to get some half decent effects with it. And we're going to now go into adding some of the actual hair itself. Now, it's not actually hair. Actually, we're going to put the dotting down first, and then we'll put the hair over top. So you want to go to a tool that we haven't used yet in any of our drawings, and that is the library. And if you go down into the tools that are called textures, there's a whole pile of different textures there that we're going to use in this bird. And then shapes, which is the one just below that, we're going to use, and then also the splatters. So we're going to use all these different tools in order to create some of the effects that we want here. So the first one is this one here, which is the brush texture. And you want to make sure that you get the colors right on this. And so you want to find out where you're going to put the texture. So let's put this texture in the blue on the beak. And you want to go in and try to match the color of the blue. So you go over there and to pick a color. When you click on this, if you click the little eyedropper, it'll bring up a target. And if you put that right over top of the blue, then you'll see the blue. Then hit the blue again and you can see where it is. And you want to go to a darker shade of that blue. So you go down into here, and then that's going to be your splatter that you're going to put in here to create some emphasis in the bird's beak. So you can see how now I'm going to give some texture right on top of the bird's beak in the same blue that was used in the background in order to create some of the texture. And then I want to do the same thing with purple. So I'd get the eyedropper again, put the pink or the purple or whatever you want to call that color, and then go down into a darker color of that. And then you're going to put that in using that splatter tool. That splatter tool, it's a texture dot 2 is what it's called. And what that'll do is it'll give you a little bit of interest in the drawing when it comes to how you do the splatters. And you may want to go really light too, and then put that right over top the darker splatters. And what that does, again, is it looks like, well, it gives some texture to the actual beak itself, so the beak isn't so boring to look at. And now we're going to go into this yellowish color, and we're going to put all of this in here with that texture in order to create interest in that beak. And so you can see how I'm just building up the beak bit by bit by adding in some of this different texture. I've also decided on this white that's underneath its eye, his eye or its eye or his eye, I'm going to put some gray or some of that darker brown splatter in there because I didn't like how white it was. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but you can see how this beak now is starting to build up and starting to get a little bit more solid. I'm going to go down to the really dark because I've decided I want to put a little bit of a dark line down the middle of the beak. So it's going to come down through here and along the edge. So it looks like there's a darker shadow on the edge of the beak. And in here, I'll put it around here just to make it stand out. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that texture way up, and I want to see what it looks like. You see how I just put that around the tip of the mouth? I just touched the screen, and you end up with the splatter effect. And so you want to use this splatter effect in different parts of the bird because you don't want this bird to be, I don't know, the splatter just makes it look kind of cool. And so we're going to put a couple different types. We're going to put some really bright yellow splatters in here in this front area, in around his eye. And we're just filling in some of the spaces with some of these dots. So then we're going to get off that splatter tool and we're going to go down here to the dots. So these are drops. They're a little bit heavier. And as you see these go on, you'll see there. Let me go back to a darker color. So you can see how these go on, and that's the same. It's a little different than the other one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these on the beak again to help with the shadows. And it'll go over top the first ones we put on to give it, again, a feeling of texture. I'm also going to use these ones. I'm going to make them a little bit bigger, and I'm going to use them to put some sparkle into the bird's eyes. And so we're going to try and get to a dark green that's in his eyes, and we're going to put a little bit of a splatter into his eye. And so you can see how when I put this in, it makes the eye look a little bit more realistic simply by putting a few dots in there. And so it's not a big thing, but it makes a huge difference when you look at the eye. It makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. And we're back into the browns again. There's a lot of browns in here. We're going to go into an ugly color, which will be kind of like in there someplace. And we just want to add some of this texture on this layer. I'm going to draw over top of it so you don't have to worry about whether or not it's too speckly and you have nothing but a speckled bird, because we're going to end up drawing over top of it. You want to put some lighter white ones in there too, so you see how this then gives it some texture on some of the darker areas. You can put the white speckles in there. And then we're going to go to even larger than that. You're going to go down to the library and you're going to go down to these splatters. So you see these different splatters, they're kind of cool. You want to get a couple of these in place. Because there's no right or wrong way to do these ones. And so you're just going to put a couple of these around, change the splatter. Let's go to a different one. Let's see if we can find another interesting shape to put on there. That splatter maybe? No, that splatter works. So you can see how some of this stuff goes on there. And again, there's no right or wrong ways to do this. We're just trying to give it some interest to look at, and some different splatter and some different paint effects in there. Yeah, it's way too small, that one. So let's pump that one way up. See what we get. Size. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to, again, duplicate it. And you can see how everything is starting to fill in. And we're starting to get a really, really bold colors as it starts to come out. And now we're going to go back to the pencil. Now the pencil allows us to do some more details. Actually, before we go to the pencil, we're going to go back to the smudging. And we're going to go move the flow way up because we're going to eliminate some of these smudges that we have on there. We want to merge these three together, and you want to work on creating a little bit more interest on some of these smudges. And the only way you're going to do that is by moving the flow way up, keeping your line fairly thin, and then you want to get back in and try to create some more of a bird, some more of a splatter effect by pulling the dots and the other stuff together. So you can see some of these things that I drew, and that you look at it and you go, well, I don't want that big blob on there, but it's just the color that you want. And so now you're going to pull the color in order to give it the feeling of a bird. Now we're going to leave some of the dots in there, just exactly the way they are, but not very many of them. You're going to pull a lot of those dots together, and then all it does is it gives the bird texture feeling to it. So the texture was created simply by putting the dots on there, and then afterward you pull the dots together and you create these long strands of hair. You still have a large number of dots that will show up, but by using that smudge tool, you start to get some feeling there. And even in the beak, I'm going to go in and start to pull some of this stuff around because I don't want it to just be all dotted. We're not drawing a pixelated drawing, we're drawing a bird. So we're going to pull some of that down. Great, but I like the feeling that that has created on the beak, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm happy with the mouth. The mouth is starting to come along fine. Too many dots in it, so we'll take the dots out, smooth them out using the smudge tool. And the eye, the dots on the eye worked really well. And because the eye is one of the few things that isn't all smudged out and doesn't have all the texture lines in it or the dots and all that other stuff, it'll stand out. And it should be that when you close your eyes and open them really fast, you should be able to see that bird's eye right away. It should just jump off the page at you. And that's the definition in my mind of what a focal point is. You want to see how to figure out what the focal point is in your drawing? Close your eyes and open real fast. Whatever you see first, that's your focal point. And if it isn't what you want it to be, then you have to change it. You have to figure out how to make the other thing stand out a little bit more. So again, I'm just working and working each one of the areas. So you end up with these streaky little feathers or hair, which you really don't find on a bird, but on this guy you do. Because he's lost his mind. Any questions over there? Or are you doing okay?
Doing okay.
So now that we've got it to this stage, now what we're going to do is we're going to come back in with a pencil. So I originally said we're going to go with a pencil, but I decided we need to go in with the smudge tool a little bit more first. And then now what we want to do is we want to build these feathers, and they're very strange. So what you want to do is you want to sort of just work on using very thin black lines, or brownie lines, I guess they are, and just start to build up the hair. All around his beak, he has like a, I don't know, goatee kind of thing. And so you just put the hair coming out of his beak, and it just sort of hangs out all over the place. And because you're using a solid black, and the colors around it aren't solid black, the feathers will start to stand out a little bit. And then right in here, I want to build a clump of feathers that comes across the mouth and sort of looks like he slept on it funny. On top of his eyebrows, I want the hair to start coming off his eyebrows, sticking up all over the place like that. Coming out the other side of his eye, I want hair to be sticking all over the place from there as well. And so I'm just using my pencil and black or dark brown to create this illusion of hair sticking out of his, well, sticking out from all over the place. And I continue to do that. And every so often you want to change the color. So I've gone really dark. For this, I may want to go a little bit lighter. So I'm going to go up into this area here and then start to create some hair with that color. And so it's not quite as dark. But again, depending on what it's drawn on will determine how dark it is. And again, you just want to create hair sticking out all over the place. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. And if you don't like it, you can always hit undo. So try it, see what happens. Now that's how we're creating the very thin hair up at the top around his eyes. Down here, we start to build, they almost look like branches. And so we're just going to put these on. Don't ask me what they are, but it gives you that feeling that there's like lightning coming off this bird. And so that's what these darker lines are that come from the bottom and work their way up. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do these. It's just a matter of giving it a different feel. And we're going to fix those up by coming in with our smudge tool again. And you have the odd one that comes up out of the pattern above his eyes and above his beak. And from his eyes, there's going to be some deep, heavier branches that come off of hair. And that'll give you that feeling. And then I'm going to come back in with my smudge tool again and mess up all of this stuff. So now I'm going to create some of the hair by smudging all the stuff that I have on there. These little lines that I put in there, I'm going to try and pull them or pull other ones across it. And again, it will give a little bit more depth in the feathers. And so if you take a look at this, this branch that is right below the beak, I pull that and keep pulling it, and then what it does is it ends up like a very spiky hair piece that's coming out from the bottom of the bird, and it blends it into the hair of the bird rather than looking like just a branch sitting over top of it. And so I'm going to do that with every one of these big brown branches I put in here, and then I'm going to come back over them with black. Once I have all this done, I'm going to pull it. And then I'm going to come over it with black and see if that helps at all. And you can hear how my my pencil's hitting the iPad. So I'm doing these very quick and very short, fair amount of pressure to try and create that pulling feeling where I get to pull just little bits of color and little strands of hair from the little strands of hair that exist already on there that I drew with the pencil. And so it'll smudge some of them together. It'll take some right off the page. But again, it gives it that feeling of chaos that you want in this bird. So you can see how this is starting to come up. Now I'm gonna do something a little different here. I'm going to go in reverse, and I'm going to put really light colored feathers on there, and do it exactly the same as I did the brown ones. And I'm going to use it to create the feeling of the bird feathers again, but now they're lighter colors. And so they will really stand out when you draw those over top of the real dark areas. And so coming out from the eye, where there's a lot of darkness there, I want it to come out and pull that whiter area. As you can see the white part under its eye, I want that to expand down into this area down here. And I'm going to do that by putting a lot of these lighter colored feathers in the bird's face. So you'll see how it starts to come together. I stopped talking there for a little while, you guys, because I'm just playing with these feathers. And there's really not much to say when I'm doing this. It's just creating the texture feeling as we go through it. And then once I get this lighter color on, then I'm going to come in with really dark black ones. And then it will just put some emphasis in some areas that don't have emphasis. But you can see how I'm starting to get the feeling that he's a little fuzzy. And so now let's go into some really dark. So you can see the texture start to come up from the nostrils into his forehead. Simply because I'm using the dark, it starts to stand out because it's over top of some of the lighter areas. And then you create that hairy bird feeling. It isn't really hairy, it's kind of very bristly kind of feathers. So I went into this area here and smudged it up really bad. And so I'm going back in and just trying to help that area blend into the forehead and looks like it's more part of the bird, which I think they have done. Which is cool. So now I'm going to put some very dark hair coming away from the certain parts of the beak. So here at the bend, I want it to be like a fluff. And I want the fluff to be on the other side as well. And then I just want random ones coming down across this white area down here. And then let's see what happens when you duplicate it. I don't like it, so I'm going to take the duplicate back off. I don't like it. Then I have to bring in my smudge tool again. Now this is where I want to go flow really strong. So you want to go really small. So 3.2, and I want my flow to be up around the 75 spot. And then what that'll do is it'll really pull. You won't see it at first, but as you go back and forth across the drawing like this, you'll see it will fill in some of the areas. And it'll make it look a little bit more bushy and a little bit less pencil drawing over top of something. So it's just a matter of pulling. I want it a little bit heavier than that. Let's go to 7.2 and see what that looks like. Yeah, that's what I get. So 7.2 will allow you to pull the hair a little bit more. Remember to pull with the hair. What you do is you use that smudge tool, and where you start is a color that's pulled. And so if you start on the black, it'll pull the black across whatever color it's on top of. that's where you'll end up with some of the interesting patterns. And the other thing that you find you can do is you can also pull the solid colors in order to create a little bit of a more interesting look to it. And so if you don't like one of the hairs that is sticking on there, just pull the background color over top it, and then you can eliminate whatever you didn't like. So it's a great way to fix up little mistakes that you might have made. So this bird, I call it the angry bird or the mean bird, simply because of the way his eyebrow comes across it. It's one of the more popular paintings I have and that I've done. People for some reason kind of like it. I think it might be because of the angriness and the feeling it portrays, but it's also one of the ones that you can do thousands of times, and each time it'll look a little different. And each one will have a different feeling. Like one will look like a real angry one, the other one may look like he's concerned, the other one looks like he's going to bite your head off. And so as you draw these, each one, depending on how you put the mouth and depending on how you put that eyebrow, ends up giving you the different feelings as you're working through the drawing. So I don't let those lines around his mouth. It ruins the feeling of the mouth, so I'll take that line off too. So I've got the smudge tool turned way up, and now all I'm doing is very rapidly pulling these lines across and making it look like it's just a chaos of colors and lines, and none of it makes any sense, but because it's sitting there and the bird is looking at it, it just seems to work. When it comes to the balance of the picture. When you're pulling from the edge, you have to be careful because you can pull in a lot of white. You start off the page and pull it across. If your background color is white, then it'll end up showing up. It'll come out all white, and you don't want that to happen. And so now I've got a fairly good idea of what I want here, but I don't have enough white in certain areas. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how, by putting the size really high and turning the opacity down really low on the flow airbrush, you can actually go in and put some lighter colors in different areas. And so I want a white streak to come down right near the beak. So right in here, I want it to lighten up a little bit. And so you go really wide, push the opacity a little higher, and then you'll see how you can lighten up different areas of it. So now I'm going to just lighten up this area as it runs through here because it was too dark. And so the same thing in here. I want that lighter color to come up through there. And then I also want this to be lighter in the middle of his forehead. So you see how I just use the white, excuse me, and soften up different areas simply by spraying right over top of it. And then I also want to darken up areas, so I'm going to go into darker. Excuse me, there we go. And I'm going to go around his eye, like the top part of his eye, and I'm going to darken it up. So you see how I just go dark over top of his eye? And then his eye's going to all darken up a lot. And I want that area to be darker. And in here, I want it to be darker. And so all I'm doing here is starting to put a little bit more emphasis in different areas. So I want the shadow around his beak to be a little bit darker. And so I'm just using the spray gun and darkening up some of the areas. And then go back into the smudge tool, turn up the flow way up there, and then pull through the middle of those white areas, and you'll pull that white into the actual drawing itself. And so you see how it starts to hide. So I'm right to the left of the eye, and I'm pulling the darker color across the area right by the eye.
On a break.
Yep. So as you're drawing, it's always a good idea to say, okay, I have to stand up and move around because you get very stiff. You're not used to drawing and for a long period of time. And so taking a break once in a while allows you to look at things from a different point of view. And it also allows you to zoom in on areas you like and zoom in on the areas you don't like, and just it allows you to clear your mind. And so it's a good thing once in a while just to take a little bit of a break. So. And so you should never apologize or feel bad about just I need to take a break. So all I'm doing is I'm putting some darker lines just to put some emphasis again back in areas that might have got smudged out or might have lost some of its intensity. And so I'm just putting in some of these darker lines in some of the areas. So you can see how I'm starting to just work the beak a little bit more. A little bit more hair in there. And so you can see how quickly this bird started to come together. So you can see how some of these, some of this hair is starting to come together and give you that, well, just some of the feeling. And now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to start using the dots again. So you're going to go down into this area here. I'm going to use these shapes, and these are drops. And so I want to put some of this texture back into certain areas. And so you can see how I make that what it does is it just settles some of this stuff back into the bird itself, rather than having it so wild and so like open with no feeling to it. And so some of these areas here, you want to put in just some of this just to calm it down. But again, it gives you that feeling that, oh, okay, so it's got some dots on it. And so you can see how that adds. And you want to go to the opposite end of the spectrum and go with some white dots. And what that does is it starts to pull this out. And so you see, rather than trying to smudge that out all the way, all you do is put some of this stuff over top of some of the areas, of the darker areas, and you end up with kind of a neat effect. And you want to put some of these in here, and then under here, in the darker areas, and over here, and there, and down here, and you can see how the bird is starting there to get a little bit interesting to look at. Now we're going to go with some really big ones. So we're going to go into here and take the settings and make them huge, and then you see how this starts to come in. Now I know that feels a little weird when you put them on, but it actually creates a really neat effect to it. So go to a darker color like this color and take a look. You see how you can put this in here? And all that is just creating, again, a little bit of a weird texture that you wouldn't have on a normal bird. And so there's really no right or wrong way to do this stuff. And so put some really big ones. Like you see how this really lightens stuff up. You see how dark, how light that came up? If you tap the same spot over and over again, it'll just come brighter and brighter as you do it. And so I'm going to do that, just some really white right here. And you see how that just lightens up that area, and I'm going to do it again here at the bottom. And this needs it. I don't know why, but that seems like a good spot for it. Okay. Then I want to go down, take the size down a little bit, go back in the library. I don't mind this, but I need to go with a real dark. So there's a tool here, this one, which is a very strange tool if you've never used it. It really lightens up an area. And so I'll show you how this works. It's called the glow tool. So you click on it, it says glow brush. Now watch what this does. Now do you see how that just brought that up, really brought it out? And so I'm not too sure how to control it sometimes, but it's kind of interesting to use. Now I'm going to use it right across the bridge, so right in here. So you see how that, I can't control that because it's on the dark, but I can control it when it's up here. So I want that. top part of the beak to be like that. And I want this bottom part down here to come up the same way. So you see the way those colors just sort of blend together? It's kind of cool tool, but I'm not too sure how to control it sometimes. So. And I put it so that's like the corner of the bird's eye. And then I want this here to lighten up and give me some neat feeling through here. And then we're going to go back in there with the smudge tool, and we're going to smudge some of these lines over top of it. So it gives you the lightest colors or the brightest colors that you can't get any other way. The problem is it's so hard to control sometimes that you have to like try it and then undo it, try it and then undo it. And so that's a glow tool. And so it gives you some really neat effects. And as long as you can blend them back in, it gives like it. You can see like it's the area that really stands out in the picture at the moment. And so I think that's really cool. And all I'm doing now is where all the little dots are, I come in and I sort of draw some lines over them. And so all we're doing is pulling, we're still pulling and still putting some dots in the different areas and creating a lighter thought, a lot lighter area for it to create some interest. And now we're going to go back to that glow tool, which is a new one, and we're going to put it as white. And then we're going to put it way down low. So go to settings, go to size way down, put the flow fairly high, but put the size way down. And then let's see if we can get some glow. Do you see how bright this is now? Now these little lines that I'm putting on here, you're going to have to soften up because they come out so bright that they'll become your focal point, and you don't want that to happen. But they do create a real neat little effect, like almost like there's lightning on this bird. And so you want to just use it sparingly, like not very much of it. But what you want to put it on in a few different areas, and then you're going to smudge them right out afterwards. So now you bring in the smudge tool and then take those and turn them into these little really interesting feathers. Almost like they're lightning bolts are running across this bird's body. And so that's what that tool has the ability to do. And so this now has become a lightning bird, which I did a better job on this one than I did my original drawing that everybody likes so much. In my mind, I kind of like these much better, but that's just the way it works. And see, once they're softened out, they sort of lose some of their effect, and they're not so brilliant, but and by taking a darker color and following it right along, it also gives it a little bit more substance. So you can see how I pull these black lines right on the top of the lightning stroke, and then it softens them up a little bit so they're not so wide and so brilliant, and they don't catch your eye so much. Although those fives are still standing out, and I still see them, so I'm going to soften them up even more. They're too brilliant. I guess that's why they call it the glow tool. So the bird is coming together really well. The only way I might have done it differently is if I had done it in layers, where I had some of the feathers done and some of the background done in layers, so that you can darken it up. Because now if I duplicate this, it's going to ruin some of the textures. And if I had done it in layers, then you can duplicate or darken up one of the layers and still have the effect that you wanted with some of the other areas. So, but now you have to do it the good old-fashioned way. Let's actually draw it out and make it work. And so that's what we're doing. So the multicolored beak is also an area of interest for people when they're looking at the picture. And so you can't have, like when people say, so what color is the bird's beak? You can make it just orange. And it could be this orange pylon on its face, and it wouldn't have the same interest. So you want to put in some different colors. And that's called poetic license, and your ability to create it the way you think it should look rather than the way it actually looks. And so this is obviously a little bit of an abstract bird. It's not a real looking bird. In fact, I'd like someone to try and identify what kind of bird it actually is, because I've never seen one that look like this. But okay, so I'm going to come back in with some white again, because I want to lighten up some of the areas. So I want the emphasis around the beak to be there, and so I'm lightening up everything around it to make it stand out a little bit more. So you see how I just lightened up all the part around below the beak? And then I'll come back in with the smudge tool and pull some of the colors back in there, but not enough so it takes away the emphasis from the beak itself. So I think we need a few white lines in here. Lines, not smudges, lines, white lines. So the white lines in dark areas will stand out a little bit, so it's worth taking a few minutes and just going in and adding some white lines over top some of the black areas, and it will again, it'll add some texture to some of the areas that needs it. So like right above his eyebrows, if it's too washed out, you put in some of those white lines, and then it will again soften it up and make the area less eye-catchy. So we've already been at this for about an hour and a half, I think. That's probably the right time. Just give me a second here. Yeah, so we've been at this for about an hour and a half. And you can see we're getting the feeling that we want from the bird. And again, it's a neat drawing because there's only a couple of identifiable parts to it. And that's the eye, the beak, and maybe some nostrils. But even in this one, I haven't done a good job with nostrils, so they don't even stand out that much like they did on the first drawing. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I can go back in and take some black and then actually make it a little bit more solid so that you can have a little bit more of a nostril simply by putting a little bit of a circle around there. And then you can see it stands out a little bit more, but that's not necessary. It wasn't a necessary thing to do now. That would have made or broke the painting.
I have to go.
Okay. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And so this is, again, just working to try and get the final touches, bringing emphasis to the area that you want to be the focal point, and that's still the eye, but you still want the mouth and the beak to be solid enough that it stands out and that it's noticeable. And so I think I've done that fairly well. And we're starting to get close to the finish of this drawing. I'm just going to put in some black lines here and there to follow some of the lighter lines. So it gives it a little bit, I don't know, I like the way if you have light and then dark right over top it gives it a kind of a solid feeling to it. And so I'm just going to follow some of these really bright lines with white. And then it gives it I don't know, almost like a tree coming out of the skin, but I kind of like it. I kind of like it. And so we're coming to the end of another Thursday drawing with less face-to-face students than I had online students, but we still created an interesting drawing. We'll see in the end what some of you have created. So if you created this along with me and you created something that you really like, let me know and send me a copy and I'll tell you what I think. That's one of the nice things about having people tune in to follow the drawings, is that I hope they share what they created so that we can continue to get better. Each time we do a drawing, we get better. And so this is the basic drawing and what we've created and what we will attempt to create. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little signature on here, which means this picture, in my mind, is done. And so I hope you enjoyed this process. And I know it was a very quick one. And you can send me some questions, and if I have time, I'll answer them. And hopefully we will see you again next Thursday at 6 o'clock for the next drawing. Thank you very much, people. Always save your drawings. Otherwise, your machine breaks down and you'll lose it all. Okay, I'm just gonna come over here and start shutting some of this stuff down. So I'm going to turn this towards me. Thank you guys for signing up and watching what's going on, and hopefully we'll see you next week. End the stream. End the stream. End the stream.